I'm going to be very careful what I say about the story because it's got so many twists that I don't want to give it away. But what I can say is that it's set in America 10 years roughly after the end of the original Phantom. And it's also set in Coney Island. Coney was a fantastic place. Sigmund Freud described it as the only reason to go to the United States. And it was beyond anything that anybody had ever seen, a great eighth wonder of the world. And it was the place where all the freaks and the oddities went. And of course the Phantom could be absorbed in there. And our story finds him 10 years afterwards. He's gone to Coney Island. He's gone with Madame Giry, his old friend, and he's gone with Meg, her daughter. And he's now the big mogul of Coney. He's now running the whole place, and that's where our story starts. I've often thought that we left the original Phantom with a little bit of a cliffhanger, and I thought, well, why not do a sequel to it at one point? And it took a very long time coming. I mean, quite frankly, I thought about it about 15 years ago, perhaps a little bit more. And I had come up with that time the idea about the Phantom going to America. And I talked about it with Freddie Forsyth, the novelist, and who obviously wrote things like The Day of the Jackal, very, very successful and fine writer. And we talked about it. We came up with a plot, which he subsequently published as a little book called The Phantom of Manhattan. But it just simply didn't gel for me. I couldn't find a way through it, and it was left alone. The only one thing I took away from the book would be this time the Phantom should live above everything. He shouldn't live below like he did underneath the Opera House. So I abandoned it, frankly, and I forgot about it. About 3 years ago, I came back and I thought, you know, there is the germ of an idea here. And I worked on it again with a couple of writers, and again, it didn't happen. But I then worked with Ben Elton on a project, and Ben, who is a very, very clever storyteller, said, you know what, this whole thing is really all cuckoo. He said, you've got a fantastic basis, the idea of him going to America, the idea of him perhaps going to Coney Island. It's wonderful, but you're not developing all the original characters. You're not taking them with you. You're putting in new characters. I'm going to do a plot which comes up with the original characters transported. So we have all of the five, Raoul and Christine, Meg, Madame Giry, and the Phantom. They all appear in our piece, and there's only one new character who's a 10-year-old child of Christine and Raoul's called Gustave. And that's what we came up with. I'm not going to give the story away, but Ben unlocked it. And I'm very story-driven. Anybody who writes for musical theatre has to be story-driven. And I couldn't write it when the story wasn't right. But the moment I had this outline, which was about just over 18 months ago, I was away. And so the first thought was, who would be a really great lyricist for this? And everybody had been telling me about Glenn Slater, who wrote the lyrics for The Little Mermaid, and he's, you know, written Sister Act now. And we clicked immediately, and so we got started. Well, our lead is the present Phantom in London, who's been playing it for a long time and has been a really popular, very sexy Phantom, I have to say, called Ramin Karamalou. And he's just great. We've just finished the recording of the complete album. It's all done now, unusually for a show. And our other principal, Sierra Boggis, who played The Little Mermaid in New York, I've known for a while because she also played Christine as a young girl when she was, well, she's very young now, but she was only 21 when she did Christine in Vegas for me in the Las Vegas version of Phantom. A terrific actress, and having just now recorded the whole thing and finished it, I know that they are an incredible fit. The passion that there is between the two of them, I mean, it's almost sort of unbearable at sometimes. It's so strong. Originally, we thought that we'd roll out Love Never Dies internationally very quickly. In fact, we thought about doing 3 productions at the same time. But we drew back from that because I wasn't absolutely certain that we could cast it sufficiently well immediately like that. I thought we must get the initial cast completely right, which is why we've got this unique thing of an album already recorded which contains our original cast. I don't think that's ever been done before. So we are going to open in London in March, then we're going to open in New York in November, and all the plans are now pretty advanced for certainly the Far East. Canada is way on the slate already, and we hope that it'll roll out around the world rather quicker than usual. But it all depends on the cast. Well, of course I'm nervous about, I'm following up my own biggest success, and there's no question about it. I mean, The Phantom of the Opera really is the biggest thing that I've ever done, even bigger than Cats, which is in itself, I mean, I never thought we'd top it. But this is it's a piece I'm very proud of, I have to say. I think it's maybe more three-dimensional in terms of the characterization than the original piece was, which really is a version of Beauty and the Beast, but a bit of a twist. But this one really does develop the characters in a way that I didn't have the opportunity to do in the old one. And therefore it was a very exciting thing for me to write musically. So yes, of course I'm nervous about it, but I'm very proud of it, and I'm very, very much looking forward to seeing it on stage. Well, I must say, when I wrote Cats, and when Cats became the longest running musical on Broadway, I thought I'll never ever succeed in even getting near this one. And then nobody thought that The Phantom was going to be quite what it was. I remember it opened in London. It wasn't the favourite of the season, in the sense that it was Chess was the musical everybody thought would be the absolute huge one that year. And we came in as the sort of slight underdog. And it just took off. I mean, it was, I remember the first preview, we knew we had something which was special, but we didn't know that we had anything that was going to quite do this. I mean, we didn't know that we were going to have people changing their name to Christine Daaé by deed poll and the whole thing that went with it. I mean, it was way before the internet, of course. And you begin to wonder, when we had these fan clubs that grew up all over the world, and in every single performance at one point they reviewed, you begin to wonder what on earth would have happened if the net had been around. But anyway, yes, it's a very tough act to follow, but nobody ever thinks that the work they're going to do can ever be bigger than the one that they do before, if you're lucky enough, like I had, to have such a huge thing as Phantom was. Although the album's completely finished and recorded, I'm going to issue a couple of songs from it before the show opens, but I want to keep the album until the show is finally on and we know exactly what it is, but it'll be out and available, I think, within days of the opening, which is somewhat unusual, I know, but it's all there, all done, and we're keeping it under wraps for the moment. Well, as I said, the story was unlocked by Ben Elton, who did a wonderful synopsis, which is the reason I'm sitting here. And Glenn Slater is my lyricist, who is, I suppose, of the new young lyricists coming along, I mean, the most exciting, I think. And in fact, we're going to be working together again on The Wizard of Oz, but that's another story. Our director is Jack O'Brien, who, of course, is one of sort of America's legendary Broadway names. I was incredibly impressed by the fact that he managed to come up with Hairspray, came up with his version of Il Trittico by Puccini at the Metropolitan Opera, which is one of the most difficult operatic evenings to stage, and Tom Stoppard's Coast of Utopia. And it was, in fact, through a friend of Tom Stoppard's that I came to him, because Tom was so pleased with what he did. He's been a fantastic joy, he's great fun, and has been a rock in pulling it all together. And we have Bob Crowley designing, who is probably, I suppose, our foremost designer in Britain at the moment. I mean, one of the sadnesses about the whole thing is that Maria Bjornsson, who designed the original Phantom, died very strangely and mysteriously, very young, only a few years ago. And of course, I did talk about the idea of the new Phantom with Maria, but Bob was a very, very close friend of Maria's. In fact, was a little bit of a mentor to her. And I think that, in a way, we all feel that the production is dedicated to her.